Hey, podcast listeners. I'm Chris Morocco, food director of Bon Appetit and Epicurious, and host of the Dinner SOS podcast. Each week on the show, we bring the expertise of the Bon Appetit test kitchen to your kitchen. And this season, we've got a little something for everyone. We're debating whether spring produce is actually worth all the hype, solving your hosting anxieties, and helping you become a better baker with our BA Bake Club episodes on Dinner SOS.
I think the thing that ambitious chefs need, they want a job that's like it's engaging, it's hard. This is it. The idea of coming up with recipes that work within a very strict budget and then deploying that into a school district that feeds 90,000 kids a day, it's cool.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. Dan Giusti is the founder and CEO of Brigade, an organization placing restaurant chefs in institutions like school cafeterias and senior centers. Formerly the head chef at Noma, he's now dedicated to bringing delicious and healthy meals to 40 institutions across the country. This year alone, they expect to serve over 1 million meals. It's so special to have Dan in the studio to talk about growing up on Italian-American classics, pivoting from Noma to Brigade, and how all of the work happens.
Also on the show, I have a terrific conversation with the journalist Adrian Miller. He's the author of a great new book, Asian Heritage Chefs in White House History, Cooking to the President's Taste. I hope you enjoy this episode.
Dan Giusti, this is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to have you here today. I think that Brigade is just a really cool concept, and I have a lot of nerdy questions about how it all works. But before we get into that, I want to get a little bit of insight into who you are. And I'm wondering if you could tell me a food memory you have from growing up.
Yeah, I'd say my most vivid food memory, which is a memory that it's well, not a memory, but a thing that I encounter actually annually, is just sitting down at my aunt's table. So I come from a big Italian family. My aunt, we refer to her Zia as aunt in Italian, so Zia Rosa, and sitting at her table and eating in general. I think that's literally where I decided I want to be a chef. That's where I got my love for food. That's where I realized that I was a very fortunate and privileged person to have that experience, and just sitting down and getting delicious food made by a woman who's extremely selfless and just wants to make people happy.
What kind of food would be on her table?
So at Zia Rosa's house, you sit down. You always have a pasta course first. And the pasta that I would refer to maybe specifically as a food memory is just pasta with tomato sauce made with the tomatoes that she jars still to this day. So she's in her 80s now. She'll jar about 450 jars of tomatoes each summer. She replenishes the empty jars that she has. So she has a wall of jars. She's like the real deal. She's messing around. She's a legit cook. So she makes the tomatoes, and then she makes sauce with the tomatoes. So you sit down, you have a couple dishes of pasta that gets cleared, and then you always have a meat, a couple vegetables, and a salad. And for example, I was there a few weeks ago. We had veal saltimbocca. She made veal saltimbocca as the meat. A simple salad that's usually just, romaine and some vegetables, cut up vegetables and a dressing. And then the vegetable sides can look a little different. She did a little thing of roasted asparagus with Parmesan cheese on it, just kind of baked in the oven. And then that gets cleared. And then dessert usually consists of fruit, but also some kind of sweet cookies. The desserts there are usually pretty not so sweet. So like shortbread cookies, things like that, pretty simple. But, it lasts a long time.
It's like a 4-hour.
It's a long meal.
Yeah. I love that. I'm always so interested with people who are chefs and come from a family of really prodigious cooks.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever get to cook for her, or is it like her house, her cooking?
Well, a couple of things to that. It's hard for me to do anything in her house.
Yeah.
Because she won't stand for it. That's a cultural thing. very transparently, it's partly because I'm a man, and in that culture, it's kind of like if I clean something, God forbid, it's like a problem. Like, don't touch that. You shouldn't be touching this. And it's a very old school thing. I try to help. I try to cook. I will say cooking in her home for me is very nerve-wracking because anyone who's ever eaten at that table, you just eat delicious food. The standard is, it's like if you were a chef who was just getting started and you had the opportunity to go cook in a big time restaurant.
Yeah.
And then the expectations, like me cooking there is like, ugh.
What makes you more nervous, when you were cooking at Noma or when you're cooking at your Aunt Rosa's house?
That's a great question, because I was always nervous at Noma pretty consistently for 4 years. At Zerosa's house, it's a different kind of nervousness in that I know everybody there loves me and it's not going to be a problem. But at the same time, I feel like it's such an expectation, and it's like not even embarrassing, but you feel like you have to, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like you let yourself down. Like, I've cooked there a few times and I'm like, that wasn't as great as I would have hoped it had been. And like, everyone's like, this is amazing. And you're like, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
The standard has been set. You have like the ancestral weight upon you.
It's the truth. And it's funny because it dawned on me. I told her that. And she just laughs it off because she's like, oh, and she says she's afraid to cook in front of me. She's like, oh, she's like, I and I'm like, what are you talking about? You literally are the best cook I know. It's ridiculous.
It's really interesting to me to be talking about like cooking in a restaurant versus home cooking, because like kind of the nature brigade is taking chefs that are used to cooking in one context and bringing them into a different one. Do you think that like all good food is just good food, or do you think there's like a difference in approach?
No, I think I've always thought, especially since leaving Noma, but even before, like going to Noma, and like you feel like the stakes are so high and it's very different, and then going into schools. To me, like, food is food. It's just like, who's your customer? What's your budget? What are the parameters? What are the facilities? What equipment do you have? That's all it is. It's just like, I think if you're in a home, you know who you're cooking for, you know what your budget is, you know what people like, what they don't like. Same thing in a restaurant. You have a budget, so I think it's all the same.
Yeah, the
really.
context is what matters.
Yeah, the context is everything. And then from there, I just think it comes down to how much you want to put into it. Do you want to work really hard or do you not? And that's literally just up to you. Like, cooking something at home that's very simple for your family, you can put a lot of thought into it. You can put a little thought into it. It's the same thing in a restaurant. Like, that's up to you, though. It's not like, well, this is a simple thing, so I don't have to think about it. Like, everything, you can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and think about a million details. But usually we don't. But we could.
Yeah. So going into Noma, like, what were your kind of expectations and goals for that experience?
To be honest, when I went there, it was like I had been a head chef of a restaurant in Washington, D.C. I was young. I probably took a head chef job too early. It became more administrative than really cooking and learning. And I also didn't do a very good job. And I think I realized that. I was probably in over my head, not a very good head chef. So I wanted to kind of go backwards, go somewhere where I could go learn again and encounter that. And I literally made a list of 3 restaurants. We talk about goals. It was Noma, the Fat Duck, and Alinea. And I was like, I want to go work at one of these restaurants, and I want to see what it's like to work at one of the best restaurants in the world. That was like my goal. That was like the whole point of going. I ultimately obviously went to Noma, was to go there. Like, what does it feel like working in one of those restaurants? What are the people like? Can I hang with those people? That was literally the reason for going there. That's it. Yeah.
And then you stayed for 4 years, so I guess you could hang.
I could hang, and I went there. I got a job. I didn't think I could hang in the beginning. When I was there for about 6-7 months, and at that time, I literally went to go speak to the head chef, and said, I don't really think I'm doing a good job here. Like, I don't really know what to do. I was like 27, 28. I forget exactly how old I was. And most of the people there were like 21, 22, 23. You work a lot. Like, they're running around. Most of those people had a lot of international experience, whereas I didn't. I just felt like I was not doing a good job. And I went to him and I was like, I don't really know if this is working out, and I don't really know what to do. And that's when this was literally, I think it was 8 months after I had started there. He was like, I'm leaving in a year, and we want you to become the next head chef. So then it was like, okay, it was both very exciting and very scary at the same time, because I just had the thought in my mind that I wasn't even doing a good job at the lowest level, let alone being in charge. And my predecessor there, gentleman Matt Orlando, he was like golden child. He worked at Per Se, he worked at Fat Duck. Like, the guy's resume was like crazy, and he was like, everybody loved him.
Big shoes.
Big shoes, yeah.
And then once you kind of stepped into that role, what kinds of things did you get to do that you found exciting?
I mean, to be honest, working in that place was such an incredible opportunity. I mean, first of all, one of the things that drew me to the experience there overall was the team that worked there. I mean, we had 20 to 25 nationalities, I feel like, represented at any given time. We had about 45 people in the kitchen when I was there, half of which were interns. And you just had this amazing variety of people coming from all over the world. And to think that all came together on a daily basis to produce this meal was incredible. And the ingredients, I would say 60% of the ingredients were things I'd never tasted. So just tasting those things, surrounded also by absolute talent. I was never the most talented person there if I stretch the imagination, not even close. I think I had a certain skill set that was very appropriate for being the head chef. But to have so many incredible people around you who were so talented that you could look to and just kind of be in their presence and see how they worked and operated was really special. And then the guest experience. I think we met a lot of people who were really excited to come and eat at Noma. And that's a pretty cool thing that I think it's easy to take for granted. But in a restaurant like that, lunch and dinner every day is fully booked. And every day is the same. It's really exciting. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of expectations. But there's a lot of excitement from the guests. And that's like such a cool thing. Like, people are like, this is like what they saved up for.
Yeah.
Or they came to Europe for that reservation to come eat. And again, there's a lot of pressure involved in that kind of thing. But it's so cool to see people so excited about what you're providing them.
Yeah, it's like the highest level of, restaurant as a cultural form that you can really like kind of stunt on people, right? And always push the envelope.
Yeah. I mean, people were coming there, and that's like, it's the ultimate luxury, I think, as a chef to get to that place, which is very different from what folks have to do in institutions, is that every person coming through that door wants to eat what you want to serve them.
Mm-hmm.
There's no menu. Nobody knows what they're going to get, and you just show up, and it's like, that's what we're here for. And like, to be a chef and to be able to work in that way, it's pretty incredible. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of power. And when you say institutions, you mean like schools, nursing homes?
Yes, basically, yes, schools, nursing homes, prisons, basically in all these places, when you're cooking for those folks, you're cooking for them. It's not about you and your vision. They depend on the meals you're providing them. So it's all about them, their preferences. Now, obviously, we need to toe the line between nutrition and so on, but at the same time, like, you are cooking for them. And that is mentally a very big switch when you come from working, and it doesn't need to be Noma. You cook in a restaurant, most restaurants where people paying a good amount of money, you are going there to eat the vision of that chef.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about that chef and what they want to cook in their team. In institutions, it flips, in my opinion. Same thing like feeding your family at home. It's not about your vision as the person cooking for your family. It's like, you're feeding your family. You need to make sure that they eat and they feel good about the food. And that's a real big shift to make.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to think about that shift. And, the institutions is what makes up the work that Brigade does. I want to maybe take a step back. Can you tell me like where this idea for Brigade came from and how it kind of first came into fruition?
Yeah. So I think the first two things we talked about, my experience at Zerosa's house and everything about her, and then me finding out that I can hang at the highest level in cooking, it was like the culmination of those two things. When I got into cooking, it was because of my aunt. It was because I saw her as a person that could make people happy through food. I was interested in food. I started to wonder why her food was so delicious and maybe other people's food was not as delicious. And that got me thinking. So when I was 11, 12 years old, I started cooking. When I would go there, I'd ask her questions. I'd get involved in cooking. And then when I went to high school, I went to a very competitive high school, and like straight away freshman, people are talking about where they're going to college, all these things. And I did well in school. I was a very good student, but I hadn't really considered what my career would be. And I was like, yeah, I really like cooking. I could be a chef. And I went to a career fair. There was a person there from the Culinary Institute of America where I ultimately went. She's like, you should get a job. I got a job in a very, casual restaurant. And I just loved working in restaurants. I just loved the vibe. I loved the feeling. I was 15, 16, getting, exposed to conversations that you would probably normally not get exposed to. And I just liked it. I enjoyed it.
Got a big vocabulary.
Yes, I liked it. And then I went to culinary school, and it became all about fine dining in fancy restaurants. And that's all that mattered. It was like, to be successful in this space, you need to work in one of these restaurants and you need to get to the top. So basically from that point to working at Noma, that's what I tried to do. Towards the end of my time at Noma, it was time to move on. Not because I didn't like it, because it takes a toll on you working in a restaurant like that. And I realized I could hang at the highest level. I had a lot of confidence in myself. And I looked back as to like, why did I get into cooking in the first place? It had nothing to do with fine dining restaurants, with cooking in that way. And I was just thinking to myself, like, what do I want to do? I was like, I want to feed people. I want to take care of people through food. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to do what, I was interested in as a kid, what I saw in my family. I want to give as many people that opportunity to have people eat delicious food that deserve it. So I started thinking, how could I do that? And I ended up on this idea of institutional food. And that's because originally I was like, well, maybe I'll start like a fast food chain that serves wholesome food to a lot of people. And then I was like, I don't know, there's a lot of food waste already. I was like, we're just going to make a whole bunch more food. Like, we don't need more food produced. There's already a lot of food being wasted. And this was in 2015. I was still in Copenhagen. I stumbled upon a school food article online. The Obamas were still in the White House. So like that stuff I felt like was being talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And it just hit me. I was like, institutional food, that's it. It was like, checks all the boxes. It checks basically, when we talk about things like feeding a lot of people on a daily basis, feeding people who depend on it, not creating more food, just taking food that's already being produced and trying to improve that food. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, wow, like chefs never want to go into these spaces. That's a problem. Not that the folks that work in these spaces aren't capable, because of course they're amazing, but they're not, chefs are trained to cook, trained to train other people to cook. And the fact that so many chefs, it's the last place they would ever work, that creates a problem. So that was like the impetus of the whole idea. Like, let's start a company that just gets more chefs into these spaces. And even outside of anything else, like inherently, if we can get good chefs in these spaces, like the food in these spaces will improve. Mm-hmm. And that's like a big win.
Yeah, I think back to the school lunches that I had growing up, and I don't know who was making them, but I was definitely not excited to eat them.
Sure.
And it is this captive audience, right, of kids that like maybe that's the only meals that they're getting also are in the school, and they need to have brain power and like pay attention in class, and then you're getting like a cardboard piece of pizza and it's getting counted as a vegetable.
It's hard. It's a really hard space, and I know we'll have time to talk about that, but that's, you have all these folks who've worked really hard to do this, and unfortunately in a lot of cases the result doesn't show that, because it's so challenging to put out a delicious school lunch. And then of course the people who get criticized are the folks that work in the school kitchens. And it's not their fault. It's just a very difficult system. And it's like, have they been trained? Has there been resources for them to be trained? They're working in, a tight budget, limited equipment in the kitchen. And then the final product, again, I would argue that no one's happy with it. The folks in the kitchen aren't happy with it. Students aren't happy with it. And, it could be a really negative experience all around. And that's how you get to this place where the general, the fact that school food is even a term.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't even like saying that, because it's like, it's food served in a school. But no, school food is actually a term because it actually denotes something that in most cases has a negative connotation, unfortunately.
Yeah, okay. I have so many questions about, I feel like it's a chicken or the egg question. Like, how do you recruit chefs that want to go into these spaces, and how do you make them spaces that chefs want to be in? Yeah,
so I think we can't we can't change the space. I think the space is what it is. And if anything, we're lucky to have the opportunity to go into these places, because if it gives us access to feeding a lot of people. What I will say is creating a team that makes it more inviting, for chefs to join. I think trying to go off and do this work by yourself, which is something that happens, school districts can hire chefs independently if they want to, but you're kind of on an island. You're like a chef working in a school district. No one else around you is seeing things the way you're seeing things. If you come up with some great meal and you serve it to kids and they hate it, who do you turn to? Everyone's looking at you like, hey, what did you do here?
Yeah, we told you it wouldn't work.
That's
kind of
it.
thing.
Right. But when you're a chef that's part of a team of chefs doing this work, you feel the support. You have people who can tell you like, hey, don't worry about that. You can have people tell you things that help you avoid issues. You don't feel so isolated. So I think we create that environment. In terms of recruiting chefs, finding chefs, it's probably the biggest challenge we face as a company. Our demand for chefs in institutions has actually surpassed our ability. Well, not surpassed, but has taken us to the point where it's really hard to keep up with finding chefs because we're very scrutinizing. I think that's another thing. People assume that because we're hiring chefs to work in public schools that we'd hire like anyone. Like they don't need to have a certain skill level. It's like, no, we're actually very critical of who we hire from a variety of kind of viewpoints. We're looking at people's character so much. Are these the type of people that can go into a school kitchen and really get people to buy into what we're trying to do, not seem pretentious and cocky? And, people's perception of chefs when we talk to them in schools is very negative. They think people are going to come in and yell at them, and that's what they think.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate that is the perception, from a lot of people of chefs in general. So we need chefs who not only are good chefs, they're very organized, they are great communicators. And those two things, like organized, not just like from a kitchen perspective, but, from a technology perspective, like I said, communication, both in person, but also digitally. Unfortunately, a lot of chefs coming out of restaurants, even in positions of leadership, have not had a lot of verses in this kind of thing with communication, because unfortunately, the way things are set up in restaurants, it could be like a pirate ship, and you can kind of communicate however you want. So we see a lot of chefs coming out that don't have those skill sets, and that's a problem. And, we need people who can, work in a kitchen and train someone, and then also go to a school board meeting and talk about what they're doing in the schools and why is this school district paying all this money for a chef to be there, and talk about that. And it's a lot to juggle. So we're looking for really special people. And then on top of that, people who really believe in our mission and really are going to commit to this, and this not just be a thing they do for a year or 2 years. And also, a lot of attractive aspects of this job are the fact that, you have weekends off, you have evenings off.
Summer break.
These kinds of things are great. And don't get me wrong, they're perks. But at the same time, that can't be the only reason you're wanting to do this, because if it is, it's not going to work, because it's a very challenging job.
Yeah, I could see it very attractive for somebody who is maybe burned out of working in restaurants most nights of the week and wants to have, a pension or vacation, all of those things. But you're right that that's not really, those are benefits of the job, but it's not the job.
That's right. And I think it's been a hard thing for me, because sometimes, we're doing an interview and someone starts down that path, like, because, we straight up asked them, like, why are you here? Why are you applying for this job? And it all depends on kind of the order in which they talk about these things, like if they're like leading with schedule and benefits, it's hard to like unhear that. It's like, okay, so the only reason you're here is this, and then they'll like tack some little thing at the end. And I like to feed kids. Like
the kids,
I love kids. So it is difficult. And, don't get me wrong, I think there are a lot of people on our team who are burned out from working in restaurants. But I think there's a difference between burned out from working in, like, burned out in terms of working in restaurants and like burned out. And I hate to say that, but we meet some people that I think are genuinely in a place where they need to like just take a step back and really think about what they want to do. Because you can feel it on them. You can feel like they've had a negative experience and they're just grasping at straws to see, like, and that freaks me out, because we need someone who's like ready to go. So some people are like, I'm done working in restaurants, but I'm like super energetic. Because what we're getting into is challenging. We need someone who's like ready to go. It's not just the work in the kitchen, but showing up every day with the energy and the positivity and the patience to get folks in these kitchens really interested in what we're doing. That's really challenging work mentally. It takes a toll on you. You can't have somebody who's like just generally tired. And I feel like sometimes we meet people who are like, again, they need to like step back, recharge, maybe rethink of what they want to do, and then maybe come back to us. But that's a hard kind of decision to make sometimes.
Yeah. So what does like success look like for a school in this program? What kinds of food is being served and like who's getting to eat it?
Yeah. So I think success looks different everywhere. And I think the way you have to look at it is like, so every school district we work with is like at a different place. You know, some are already starting to cook a little bit from scratch. Some are serving primarily heat and serve meals that come prepackaged. So success for that latter school district might just be, okay, we're going to start making salad dressings from scratch. That's awesome. Okay, that's a win. And then you kind of progressively move from there. The district that's already cooking things from scratch, it's like, okay, like we need to keep this moving. And then the success is continuously changing. I think this is one of the most challenging things of the work we do. Because like, for example, at NOMA, it's like there's right and then there's not. And every day you would show up and do everything you could and it had to be right. And that's it. And then tomorrow we're going to do it again. It's going to be right tomorrow and perfect next day. In this space, it's like we might be at, out of 10, we might be at a 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And it might take years to get to 10, but every day you need to be trying to get better. Every day, like any school district you talk out there who's trying to make their school food better, regardless if we work with them or not, they're going to tell you there's a million things that they want to make better. They're not complacent.
Yeah.
They're just trying to figure out how to do that. And it's really hard and you can't just do it. It takes time. It could take years. So I think, success is going to look different year after year if you're really being ambitious. And I think that's hard to do though. It's hard to continuously be ambitious day after day when you're not like reaching that like ultimate goal. When you're hitting that goal day after day, it's easy to come back and do it again.
Because you've done it.
But when you're like, and sometimes if things get a little slower for whatever reason, there's a setback or whatever it may be, it can be hard. And then from the success perspective, again, we work in school districts that have 2 schools. We work in school districts that have 100. And success in a school district that has 2 schools is probably going to be much more ambitious than success in a school that, and maybe ambitious isn't the right word, but, cooking from full-blown meals from scratch in a school district that has 2 schools, maybe not that difficult. In a school district that has 100, that's extremely difficult. So, success in a school district, a smaller school district, a district that maybe is just getting started, could be making nice sandwiches, well-made sandwiches that are wrapped nicely. I'd say that's a success that kids enjoy eating. In a school district that we've been in for 2-3 years, we might be talking about like one district we work in, they serve like one of the dishes they have is like, slow roasted pork shoulder with rice and peas. Like,
yum.
And it's delicious and it's very ambitious. And that's not every school district can just do that, but it's pretty amazing that they're able to do that. And that's where they're at because they've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah. And the kids must notice that something is up and different in the cafeteria.
For sure. I mean, yes and no. It depends where you're at. I think that's another thing. Like there are some things that we do that you expect, like, oh, the kids are going to see it. And then either they don't see it or they see it and they don't like it. It's not always how you expect it to go. I think there are a lot of moments where we feel like we've made some progress in a food service program and maybe no one really sees it. And
yeah, I'm so naive. I'm like, the kids must notice that there's fresh green beans instead of frozen.
Yeah, and it depends. I mean, the kids obviously are smart. I also have this feeling like, and I try to tell our chefs when they join, this thing of like, when you work in a restaurant, you do a good job, like Noma. Okay, so every night there or every service, you gave kitchen tours after service. And I always remember after I would give a kitchen tour, and I would usually give like, the folks that we were really, if they were food critics or whatever, and it was like every service, these people were there. And I would usually personally give them the tour. And I remember after every tour, Renee Redzepi would be like, so how was it? Like what did they say? And it was a great time to get like debrief of a guest. You had like 45 minutes that you're just talking to them, trying to find out like, what did they think of the meal? Like, and if I didn't have something exclamatory to tell him, like literally it was the best meal they ever had. I think that was like the only thing that he wanted to hear. If it was like, oh, they said it was great, he'd be like, okay. And rightfully so. It was like, no, it was the best meal they've ever eaten. He'd be like, okay, awesome. Like, yes. And that feels amazing when you hear that. In a school, it shouldn't be these kids' responsive. Like, yeah, it's great when kids are polite and they say thank you. And there's different times throughout the year where, classrooms are sending letters to the cafeteria to say thank you and this and that. But like, it should be our responsibility, if we're going to ask these kids to go to school all day, that they get a nice meal and they can eat it and feel good about it and then like go on with their day. It shouldn't be this like, they're going to cheer you on like, yes.
Yeah.
So like, if anything, like I usually say, like, if we're successful, you probably won't hear much. Like you hear no complaining, kids are happy, they're eating their meal. And yeah, occasionally, you will hear a kid be like, this is awesome. But you really don't hear a lot of that. And that's like, you have to like recalibrate how you determine success. Like if kids are eating the food, like they are finishing plates of food, that is awesome. And more kids are eating the food in general. We're always measuring percentage of kids choosing to eat versus not. That is awesome. Like these are the things that you just have to watch and pay attention to and not wait for a student to tell you, wow, hey, great job today. That might not come.
Yeah. Normalize the fact that they're just getting good food.
They should. And in my opinion, that's their right. And it shouldn't be, this expectation that that they have to come and say thank you. I just, I don't think that's something that we should expect.
Yeah. So I grew up going to public school, and I feel like budget for everything was always a big concern. And I imagine that that's still the case today. And I'm curious about how that kind of factors into everything for the chefs, if they are able to, if they have those frozen meals that you just reheat and they want to start buying fresh ingredients. I imagine it's more expensive. Like, how does that whole component work?
Yeah. So just, I could tie it up pretty neatly and succinctly because it gets like, this like giant topic to talk about. But essentially the way the National School Lunch Program works is a school district serves a meal. And if they're participating in the National School Lunch Program, which most school districts do, they get a certain amount of money back from the government. So I say, I'm going to serve a lunch that meets these nutritional guidelines. So you have to meet these nutritional guidelines. So that's a big hurdle. This year, the base reimbursement rate, there's a lot of different ways to get or for there to be more money tacked onto this number, is $4.43 for lunch. Out of that $4.43, we are usually targeting about $1.50 to $1.75 for food cost. So that's what we're spending on ingredients for food. $1.50, $1.75 to put together a lunch. Very challenging. In terms of going away from a lot of processed foods to more fresh foods, there's a little bit of a swap in the two major levers. It's like food and labor are the biggest costs. When you have primarily processed foods, food cost is actually pretty high because it's all processed. It's all put together already. Labor costs are very low because you're just heating things up. So we just see a swap. We start buying more whole foods, which we could argue are better ingredients and also less expensive because they're whole ingredients. We're not in most cases going out buying organic this and organic that. There are some opportunities in some places, primarily in California where we work, to get more local produce, seasonal produce, sometimes organic produce. But generally that's challenging in our price point. But we can go to more whole ingredients. So our food cost goes down, but now we need to prepare those ingredients. So our labor cost goes up, but we stay within the same budget. The big difference between what we do in, say, like a retail environment. And I always bring this up, like on my social media, I'll post a picture or video of something we're doing. I did it recently where I was really proud of a video of one of our partnerships. And all the comments were just like, you use so much plastic. Why do you use so much plastic? And those were all the comments. That's all people cared about. Nobody cared about the fact that like this person on our team is like cooking scratch meals for kids. And look, I get that. We live in a day and age, like we need to be better about that. Thing is, like plastic's cheap. There's a reason people use plastic. And people still use styrofoam in a lot of schools, which sounds crazy. But styrofoam literally costs nothing. It's terrible for the environment. If we want to go to compostable items, they're significantly more expensive, which I'm not saying we shouldn't. But it's not like at Starbucks, like if they go to a compostable straw instead of a plastic straw, like they can just charge like 15 more cents on the $5 latte and nobody cares. We can't charge more money. So if we spend, 10, 15 cents extra per compostable tray, that has to come from somewhere. And we're already buying it's not like we're buying the best produce or chicken out there, proteins. So now all of a sudden it's like, well, you have 15 cents less because you're using compostable trays. So you're going to have to take that away from the chicken, the produce. And then I would pose that question back to people. Like, would you rather us spend more money on the food, the ingredients that kids are consuming, or the wares that they're eating the food on? And that's a really hard question to answer. It's really hard.
Yeah, it's one of those like infinite feedback loop questions that we all encounter about how we consume things in daily life. And I imagine, not to point fingers, but some of the people commenting probably are using plastic in their own homes as well.
Sure. And, to be fair, like if one school district, even a small school district, or let's just say even a singular school works to decrease the amount of plastic that they're using or styrofoam that they're using, just one school making small adjustments, which that's what we typically do. We work with districts to make these adjustments. Some of the school districts we work in, it's all compostable or even reusable. They're not even, it's all reusable trays. One school, the impact that has is so much higher than one individual. Like, this individual saying, well, I do this in my own life. It's like, okay, it doesn't really make much. To be fair, it doesn't make much of an impact. One singular school making those changes, just the small changes, doesn't need to be wholesale, no plastic. It's like, well, maybe we can move from, plastic forks to using compostable forks. And that's like a good step in the right direction. That has so much more impact than one individual. But it's also so much more hard to make those changes.
Yeah. And the reusable forks, like that's not an option because of the like time spent to wash all the dishes.
Well, see, that's a great point. That's exactly the same reason. So like when I started Brigade, the first school district we're in, we went from 0 to 100 overnight. We're gonna all the values we have, we're doing that tomorrow. And part of that was plates. We have reusable plates, reusable trays. Sounds amazing. Yeah, okay, well, you're going to have to pay someone to wash all those things. So paying someone to wash all those things means that you have less money to pay someone to cook the food. Like, like something has to give. So it's all about a balance. Or two, like, people are like, why don't you use reusable forks and knives? Like, have you ever been in a cafeteria with kids? Like, little kids.
Fork in the eye. Yeah.
And also little kids will throw them all away by accident. Adults, like older kids, will throw them away on purpose because they think it's funny. And you're going to pay someone literally to stand next to the trash can to make sure that doesn't happen. And we've seen that. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like it's funny because there's criticism of all these school lunch programs out there. And like, we're in this mix now. And because of my background, maybe, people give me respect. But there's all these people out there who work so hard and they're so good at what they do. And they're trying to do the right thing every day. And then people criticize them and have absolutely no clue the challenges that these folks face. No clue. Not even a semblance of an idea. And it's so frustrating to me because it's really not that hard. Like, your kids go to these schools. You can visit the school. You can call someone up. You can write an email. Do 5 minutes of research online to understand how these programs work. But instead of understanding, people just criticize,
Yeah. I didn't even think about throwing out the forks, but that is a huge problem.
We did that. When we did plates in New London, we would literally see kids throwing stacks of plates away, literally because they thought it was funny. Middle school, high school kids.
I shouldn't laugh because I'm encouraging it.
10 plates, 15 plates. And then the little kids, like, they're just trying to get through their day. Things are falling off. They're falling on the ground. So again, is it impossible? I'm not saying these things are impossible because, I'm the kind of person that always comes out and says, like, we need to think through how we're going to do this. And then my peers are like, well, we do it here. And I'm like, of course, like, there's places you can do this. You can do these things. You can figure it out. There's a lot of amazing things that can happen. But the assumption that every school district out there has the resources right now to just go out and make these wholesale changes, it's not reality,
Yeah, I think the answer obviously is just funding our schools more and like making programs like this possible to make those changes.
And just to be clear, since we're on the subject, because it's an important thing as we're trying to inform people about the National School Lunch Program, an interesting aspect, though, of budgets is that the school food budget in a school district is actually separate from the general budget of the school district. So the money, all the money that comes back from, for reimbursement for these meals goes right into that budget. And that money can only be used for that budget. Sometimes when school food programs are struggling, they might rely on the general school district budget to help them, but that can become problematic. So that's another thing. There's pros and cons, but these folks who run these school food programs are like on an island. they need to like maintain their own budget. They're not getting funding from anywhere else. It's just they're running like a business.
Yeah.
And that's the only department in a school district that has to do that. The only one. Everyone else, the money is funded through a general fund and this and that. So that's a real challenge. In fact, in some school districts, the school district will actually charge the food service program for utilities, electricity. I mean, it's crazy. It's like insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many institutions is Brigade working with right now?
I think we're in a little above 40 right now. So primarily school districts. Again, from small to big. The biggest ones we work with right now are Fresno Unified School Districts, Oakland Public Schools, Newark Public Schools, Buffalo Public Schools. So pretty big cities. And then we have working with a senior center here in Manhattan. And then we have a chef in Portland, Maine, who works in a place called Preble Street, which caters to homeless individuals. And then we've done a couple pilots in prison systems. So we haven't had like real ongoing partnership there. So the idea has always been about being in institutions at large, but really the majority of our work has been in school systems.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. I feel like we've talked a lot about successes and struggles and all of these things. And I'm curious, like, if you could have a magic wand, like, or a platform to make meaningful change, like, what would you want that would make Brigade like easier and more successful?
I mean, to be honest, I think that more chefs being interested in this work would be my dream for Brigade or not Brigade.
Yeah. So if you're a chef listening right now, do you have an elevator pitch besides this whole conversation?
Yeah, that, I think the narrative around doing this kind of work, being a chef in an institution, is always just about it's rewarding. There's great benefits. And yeah, it is rewarding. It's really important work that we're doing. It is. There's no way around it. And it's needed work. It's crucial work. The benefits are great. We pay well. There's great, a great schedule. All that. That's amazing. We've been beating that drum for years. And I think we can make that pretty clear. I think the thing that chefs need, ambitious chefs need, they want a job that's like, yes, like it's engaging. It's hard. It's like, this is it. And that's the point I think we've had a hard time communicating. The idea of coming up with recipes that work within a very strict budget that can be created in X kitchen, but also this other kitchen as well that has a different equipment setup, and figuring out how that works, and then deploying that into a school district that feeds 90,000 kids a day. It's cool. It's absolutely cool. And like, to be fair, since I started doing this work, I don't, like, when I'm like hearing about stories of chefs and restaurants, and like, I love restaurants. I eat out all the time. I think it's amazing. But, I don't know. I'm not as enamored as I once was, where like when I hear about success stories that don't even have chefs, they're just an institution that figured out how to like serve better food to, again, hundreds of thousands of people a day. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's intense, and that's hard. And that to me is the missing piece of communication that we haven't been able to figure out how to get out there to more chefs, because I think they just think of this as like, well, like it's rewarding work and that sounds great and it's a great schedule, but like I'm still in it. Like I'm still going for it. And it's like, yeah, you can still go for it and do this work. I think people think of it like they're giving up in some way. Like I've been working ambitiously in restaurants, and now I'm going to I'm like retiring from that now. It's like, no, that's not what you're doing. This is actually really hard and really engaging. And I think that's what I would tell chefs. If I had the opportunity to just continuously talk to chefs in person, that's what I would try to tell them, communicate to them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a chef, but I'm sold. If you want to go from like 200 covers a night to 90,000 covers, this is the job for you.
That's the job for, yes, that's it.
And you guys have like an inaugural summit coming up in July, right?
Yes. So it's the Brigade Summit. And, we're like in the midst of like really planning this thing. It's the first time we're doing it. It's the end of July in the Bronx at a Dream Charter School, which is this beautiful school that we work at. And the whole point of it is to bring groups of people together that, like, I have groups of people that I interact with all the time, but they're never really in the same place. Now I'm usually at conferences where it's all institutional folks, and they're talking about certain subjects and certain things. And then I have a lot of peers, obviously, who are chefs in restaurants. They're usually in a certain place, and they're having certain conversations. A lot of these conversations serve both parties. but they usually don't end up in the same place. And as much as the conversation served both parties, I think there's a lot of very differing opinions and perspectives. And I think I've put myself in a unique place where I hear a lot of these different things. And I'm just like really excited to have all those people in the same place. So we're going to have our attendee list right now is like all over the board. I mean, you've got chefs from 3 Michelin star restaurants, school food directors, people who work in prison food, farmers, someone from Pepsi Cola's coming, like just all over the place. They're going to be in the same room, and we're going to have conversations and topics like, what does good food mean to you? Simple things. And it's just amazing to hear how different those opinions can be. And I think that's pretty powerful, because I think you go through life living in a bit of a bubble thinking that good food means a certain thing. Or, what should we prioritize when we're talking about good food? And you're going to have someone talk about seasonality, locality, all these things. Someone else not even mention those things. It's very fascinating. So the attendees will be along those lines. And then also the folks speaking, we're really in the midst of that now, but it's really trying to get as diverse of a group as possible that can just give their perspective. It's not about, we're going to have some big names there, which I'm excited about, but it's not really about big names. It's really more about having genuine conversation that hopefully people leave both inspired, but like thinking a little differently. I know I think completely differently, like starting in this space. When I came into this work, I'm quoted saying this, which is embarrassing. I think one of the first interviews I ever did for Brigade, I was still in Copenhagen, I said something along the lines of, I want to change the way people think about food. And I swear that my opinion on food has changed more than anyone I've talked to. That's for sure. It's completely changed the way I view food and the way it works and the way I think about it. And that's just because, I've put myself in a different place, and I've talked to a lot of amazing people who have different perspectives.
I love that. And can I come to the conference? Is it open to the public? Like,
okay. Yeah, so it's open to the public. We're selling tickets. We'd love for you to come. We'd love for anyone else to come. We have a website, chefsbrigade.com. That's not the name of our company. Our company's name is Brigade, but Brigade was not available, but you can go there and get tickets for it. Yeah.
I'll link to it in the show notes for this episode. And to close, I want to play a little rapid fire game with you.
I'll try.
So I'm going to make you pick some favorites.
I'll try.
Okay. Your favorite, like, classic American school lunch staple?
Pizza. Classic square rectangular pizza.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
Your favorite ice cream flavor?
I say mint chocolate chip. Green mint chocolate chip.
Artificial green?
Yes.
Yeah. Your go-to food to bring to the picnic?
I'm going to say like a good Italian sub. I don't remember the last time I was on a picnic, but if I went to a picnic, I think it'd be a good Italian sub. Yeah. Yeah, like a 6-foot Italian sub,
Everyone can have some.
That's right.
Your favorite Jersey City restaurant?
Ooh.
You could do a few.
No, I was gonna say I think I've been to one. I'm not representing Jersey City right now.
Like, don't you live in Jersey City?
I do live in Jersey City.
Do you eat in the city in New York?
I eat in the city a lot, and that's a shame because there are a lot of very good restaurants in Jersey City. But I think, unfortunately, I eat out more often in New York City. Yeah.
Okay. Then your favorite like weekend night out in New York restaurant?
Yep. Estella, far and away. That's my favorite restaurant anywhere.
Favorite New York bakery?
I would love to tell you what it is because I went there and I had an amazing cookie. It was probably the best cookie I've ever eaten in my life. But I was there a couple weekends ago, and I felt as though they've become very, as these trendy places get, the way they were treating people was very obnoxious, and I will not promote them.
Okay. I love that. And
I refuse to promote them now because it was very bothersome, but the cookie was delicious.
Okay. Taking a hard line. Your go-to late night snack?
So I eat usually once a day, and I eat late. I usually eat a big meal at the end of the night. So for me, a snack is like my dinner, but in the true spirit of the dish, it's my favorite food. And also like a late night thing is aglio, olio, e peperoncino, which is like a pasta dish, which is the kind of dish you would make late night because you have all the stuff around. And sometimes still to this day, I've done it a couple times where I'm with friends and it's like, we've eaten dinner and it's like 1 a.m. and you make that and it's
second
delicious.
Dinner.
Yeah.
Okay, finally, a food scene from a book or a movie, something made up that you wish you could eat in real life.
I would have struggled with this question, but I watched The Big Night, which is an amazing movie. If people listening have never seen The Big Night, to me, it's the best food movie out there. And there's, the final scene is basically the whole movie leads up to the one dinner scene. And it seems amazing. And I would love to have experienced that. And I actually, what I also found out is that The Big Night takes place at the Jersey Shore, which is one of my favorite places on earth. And I didn't know that The Big Night takes place there. So even better. I'd love to have been there.
I didn't know that either, but now
I thought it took place in California. And I looked, and then they said something about the East Coast. And I was like, East Coast? I'm like, I bet you this is Jersey. Sure enough.
There we go. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was so fun.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Adrian Miller, welcome to This Is Taste. How are you?
I'm good. Good to be with you.
Finally, I've admired your work for many years, and you're
thanks.
here. So thank you for stopping by.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate that.
Yeah, well, the book that you have just published, "Cooking to the President's Taste: Asian Heritage Chefs in White House History." When I saw this title, I was amazed that there is a history here that I had no idea about.
Mm-hmm.
I've obviously there's chefs who've had done state dinners with Asian heritage, but you write colorfully and with so much reporting as a historian about these chefs who have not been given the time that they deserve. Why was it important to focus on chefs of Asian heritage?
Well, I had previously written a book on the history of African-American presidential chefs.
Yeah.
And it was while I was researching that book that I came across the memoir cookbook of Lee Ping Kwan, who was the presidential yacht chef for Warren Harding, Calvin Coolidge, and Herbert Hoover. So I fell out of my chair when I found that book and read it. And I said, okay, this book was published in 1939, but it fell into obscurity. It needs to come back. A broader audience needs to know about this. And so when I got the book deal with the White House Historical Association, they encouraged me to find out about other people of Asian heritage who have cooked for presidents. They didn't want to just hear Kwan's story, which is fascinating in and of itself. And so that gave me the license to just start digging into all these archives and other things. And I've identified 37 chefs in this book, but I know I'm just scratching the surface.
Incredible work. Before we get to more chefs and Lee Ping Kwan's story, let's talk about your own history with the White House. You worked in the administration in the 90s, and tell me about your experiences in the White House working with presidents, and what's the food like, Adrian?
Yeah. So I worked on something called the President's Initiative for One America. It was an outgrowth of President Clinton's initiative on race. And here's the wild idea behind the initiative on race. Okay, you ready for this? If we just talked to one another and listened, we might realize that we have a lot more in common than what supposedly divides us. Wild, right?
90s were a wild time.
I know.
Wild times, maybe we weren't communicating at that level that well.
Yeah. So I was at the very end of President Clinton's second term. And so while I was there, I was on the policy side. So I didn't work in the kitchen. But I did get towards the end of my stint there, I got something called being special assistant to the president. So it's called a non-commissioned officer. So that gave me privileges to eat in the White House mess, which is this clubby private dining space in the West Wing. A lot of people don't know about it. It's really for senior administration officials, not necessarily the first family. So I got privileges there. And let me just tell you, the food was really good, especially the cheeseburger.
Wow.
Slamming. Now, that was 25 years ago, so I don't know what it's like now, but...
Yeah.
And that is run by Navy cooks.
Yeah.
And there's another connection to Asian heritage because a lot of Asian cooks were in the Navy and they get assigned to the White House.
Yeah, well, you write about cooks on yachts, on boats. They call them yachts, but they're large boats. What's the dining room like? Like, take us to the West Wing. I mean, the White House is small, so it's not a big space.
It's not a big space. So it's really, if you've ever been to a private like an old school private dining club. Now, I haven't been in a lot of those spaces, but that's what it's like. A lot of wood, paneling, old portraits. It's just that kind of feel. You feel like you're in a private club dining.
It's amazing to have a cheeseburger in the White House. That's a great story.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about Lee Ping Kwan, who you referenced. This book really sent you down not just Lee Ping Kwan's story, but the story of many of these chefs. Tell us a little bit about this important figure in history.
Yeah, so he was born in China, and he was an accomplished culinarian before he even got to the United States. So as a young man, he trained under one of the famous chefs in China. So a lot of the people that entered the story go into U.S. military service because it was a pathway to U.S. citizenship. And so he saw opportunity. So he shows up as a very good cook. He's cooking on torpedo boats and other things, but then he starts working his way up through the ranks. Of all our military branches, the Navy takes cooking the most, they're serious about it, especially these admirals. So there's actually an annual culinary competition in the Navy. Yeah, like similar to kind of like what you think of Top Chef and things like that.
Have you written about this?
I have not written about it.
Oh, my
but
goodness.
I want to, yeah.
That would be a great story,
right?
Being on the scene there.
Yeah. So he makes his way up, and eventually he gets assigned to the USS Mayflower, which was the presidential yacht roughly from the late 1800s until the mid-1920s.
Tell us about the type of food that Li Pingquan is cooking. I mean, of course, it's not Chinese food, I would imagine. I'm imagining it's very different. It's European inspired. But what's on the menu typically for these meals?
So early in their careers, it looks like a lot of these chefs were just making Western/American food. And one of the points of evidence is if you look at the Navy cookbook from 1902, it's like, bean soup, all kinds of stews and things like that. But the interesting thing is by the time you get to the 1920s, when the official Navy cookbook comes out, there are Asian-inspired dishes there. So chop suey, which is, bits of meat and vegetables. You're seeing curries and things like that. So they're definitely making those type of dishes by the time you get to the 1920s. And that just shows the influence of these cooks in, fairly short period of time.
That's amazing to know that presidents were, at that era, were interested in Chinese cuisine.
Yeah, there was a more adventuresome palate than you might expect. So Grace Coolidge loved chop suey and had Juan teach her how to make it.
No way.
Yeah. Gave her a private lesson, so.
Was Calvin Coolidge a foodie himself?
That's hard to say.
Cool Cal, right? I think his nickname was.
Yeah. So you hear more about Grace Coolidge liking stuff, but certainly Cal Coolidge loves some of this stuff. But you just hear so many stories about him being stingy and all this kind of stuff. So that kind of overshadows stories about his palate. But
Silent Cal.
Silent Cal.
Sorry, not Cool Cal. I've made that mistake with another presidential food historian I had on the show.
Don't worry about it.
I make that mistake every time.
That's
Cool
right.
Cal sounds good. Before Li Pingquan is a chef named Aloy, and you focus on this story from 1905 in September. There's a banquet that Aloy cooks that you find significant.
Yeah, so at that time, Theodore Roosevelt is president, and he's trying to broker a peace between Russia and Japan, what was known as the Russo-Japanese War. And so he brought delegations from Japan and Russia to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They were originally going to do it in Newport, Rhode Island, but they felt that the Japanese delegation would experience more racism because of the white tourists there. So they wanted someplace more secluded. So they go to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. They have this conference starting early September, goes for a couple weeks. So what Roosevelt did is he would have the delegations on separate yachts, and then they would come to the Mayflower, his yacht, to actually have the negotiations. So there's this key luncheon, right? Just when tensions are high, and it looked like the negotiations were going to just fall apart. And so Roosevelt said, okay, this is a delicate situation. I got a lot of egos. How am I going to work this meal? So typically when you have a meal, it's a sit-down thing, and everybody is jockeying for proximity to the president because where you're seated kind of gives an indication of your status. So the brilliance of Roosevelt is he asked Chef Loy, who was the chief cook on the Mayflower, he's like, okay, we're just going to have a standing luncheon. So there's not going to be any seating.
Wow.
So now here's the thing. They weren't foodies back then. And so you don't get a lot of description of the meal itself. Only the reactions that people like the food. I was like, oh man, just give me a morsel. Give me a little bit. But I thought that was really interesting.
It's cool. And you print the menu in the book. And Aloy, is Aloy cooking any Asian cuisine, or is it mostly playing the American hits for these Japanese and Russian delegates?
Yeah, from what I can tell, it's pretty much American food.
Yeah.
So one of the menus that I have from earlier is July of that year. It was like a clam chowder was the main thing, and some other assorted things. So yeah, it's pretty much American food.
How could you imagine? I know you don't have documents to back this up, but I'm just going to ask you straight up. Like, how can you imagine Aloy is treated at this period as somebody of Asian heritage cooking for Japanese delegation, Asian, but then Russian and American? It's got to be an interesting dynamic there.
I think so. I think there's a level of appreciation, right? But then there's this lens of servitude.
Yeah.
So his humanity was probably only partly recognized. And I'm just drawing an inference from my work looking at African Americans who had served in similar positions. Get a lot of love, but at the same places like, yeah, you're second status.
Yeah,
in
you're
many
still
ways.
the cook.
Yeah, so there's like this mixed reception.
Well, moving on ahead in time, there's the chef Ariel de Guzman, who you profile, who cooked for George H.W. Bush at Camp David and beyond. I like this section a lot. It tells the story of the Bush's tastes in food, but also this chef who clearly had some nice skills.
Yeah. So, Filipino. Again, enters the Navy as a pathway to U.S. citizenship, and he excels. And at first, he was assigned to the White House mess, but then he decides, you know what? I have a chance to work for Vice President. Then George Herbert Walker Bush. He does that. Then Bush goes to the White House, asks de Guzman to help him out with that. And then the really interesting thing is that de Guzman then cooks for him post-presidency.
Oh, wow.
So when they go to Kennebunkport,
Yeah.
or they're in Texas, he's usually there cooking for them and does it for a long time. And he actually comes out with a book in 2000. It's called The Bush Family Cookbook. So that's the second book from an Asian heritage presidential chef that we have. We have Kwan's book, and then we have his book.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of the types of foods that were prepared at this period?
So he was doing classic stuff you would expect from the Bush family, especially with Maine background. So he's doing lobster dinners and stuff. But he would also mix up and do Filipino dishes. So we have adobo, the kind of the pork adobo, which is a classic Filipino dish. And then another recipe that I love is sometimes a first family will go to a restaurant that's, whatever cuisine and come back and say, hey, we had this thing. Can you make that for us? And so if you've ever been to some of these Brazilian steakhouses, a lot of them are known for the puffed cheese rolls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he replicated that. They went to a famous place in Houston, came back to the White House, said, we want to have this. And so he figured out how to make that. That's
a really good story.
Yeah.
Those are great, by the way.
Yeah. I know, right? Addictive, right?
Yeah, they're like gluten-free. They're like really good. That's a good palate there. You move on to other chefs, and I think one that is a name that I found familiar. Christetta Comerford was the longest-serving White House chef and retired only in 2024. Tell us a little bit about the history here with multiple administrations.
Yeah. So just a slight amendment. So there is one chef that served longer than her.
Oh, okay.
This guy, Henry Haller. He served 20 years. And she was 19 years and a few months.
Okay.
So,
we're being technical. That's why you're a historian.
I know. I'm not trying to shame you. I just wanted to
no, correct. Let the records be corrected.
Yeah. So she's from the Philippines, encouraged to cook by her father. But she came up through the hotel ranks, so she wasn't in the military. So she was cooking for local hotels. And then in the White House, they have this thing called service by agreement cooks. So basically, the White House kitchen is very small. I mean, like 200 square feet or something like that.
What?
Yeah. It's really small.
Wow.
If you ever go on a White House tour and get to see the kitchen, you will look there and say, my kitchen's bigger than that.
Do they do the state dinners out of that kitchen?
They do. So what they do for the state dinners, because of the massive size, that often they have to set up cooking stations outside and in hallways and stuff to accommodate that. Yeah. So she started getting hired in the 90s during the Clinton administration to help out, and she excelled. And so finally, the chef at that time, Walter Scheib, decides to hire her as an assistant chef. So she comes on second term of Clinton. And then by the time you get to the second term of George W. Bush, that's when she gets tapped to the executive chef position.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, to cook through administrations, do you find that from your research, is it just something that they just keep the staff because they want continuity? Is that the main reason, or is it just a tradition?
I think it's more. I think a lot of stuff's going on. Okay. So actually, over the course of presidential history, when there's a change of administration, the person who should be the most nervous in the White House kitchen is actually the executive chef.
Oh, interesting.
That's the person who usually gets changed out, because for a lot of presidents, they want somebody familiar. And quite a few presidents either brought their enslaved cook to the White House or just somebody who was their private cook for years. And so, that familiarity so they would tap that. When we get to the more modern presidency, that's when you start seeing considerations of, somebody who's got proficiency in culinary and a great reputation and all that kind of stuff. So then you start seeing these multi-administration cooks. So yeah, there's a sense of, hey, this person knows how to do this. We'll keep it going. It's unusual for a president to now change chefs unless they're just really not happy with what that chef is doing. And that's what happened with Walter Scheib and George W. Bush. So, otherwise probably would have gone on for a long time. And, Comerford, she was with Clinton as an assistant chef, then George W. Bush, Obama, Trump, and then also Biden during her run. Very different tastes there. And
very much. And different state dinners, different style of cooking. I mean, this job, how many hours do you think she's working during?
I asked her that. So, for a typical day, it's probably like 8 to 10 hours. And in the book, she shared what it was like to have that schedule and be a working mother.
Yeah.
Because she had a daughter growing up at that time. But she would come in and usually somebody else was starting the breakfast shift. And so she would come in and get lunch ready and work for dinner. But now when you have the state dinners, you're just there for 12, 14 hours.
Those are long days.
Yeah, those are long days.
But is there a balance in that job? Are they traveling with the president, or are they based only in the White House?
They're usually based in the White House, unless the president wants that person to come with him. So usually when they travel, there's kind of a transfer. You have other chefs that may go with the president.
Yeah.
It just depends. Because there's a small culinary team on Air Force One, and they're not really cooking. They're just reheating food that was cooked at Andrews Air Force Base. And then,
or picking up Mickey D's. Just being honest here. I'm just looking at some photos that I've seen recently.
Or a taco salad, a hard shell taco salad.
A hard shell taco salad has been served on that plane as well.
Yeah. And then sometimes somebody from the White House mess that run by the U.S. Navy may travel and cook for the president. So it kind of depends. What the president wants at that time.
From both of your books and just your general research of this dynamic, what have you learned about security? In terms of obviously there is a security protocol that they're willing to share there's probably some things that you don't know. But clearly this is like a pretty important thing.
It is. So one question I often get asked is, does the president have a taster?
I was trying to be a little more eloquent with that, but yes, it is true.
So the answer is yes. And the taster is usually the president's most vocal critic. No, I'm just kidding.
That's good. For a second, I was like, "That's a good joke." That's a good joke.
Yeah. So the chef is the taster.
Yeah.
So the chef tastes everything before it's sent out to the president. So what's interesting though is when let's just say a president wants to go to a restaurant, the most secure thing that can happen is for someone in the Secret Service or staff just to go to the restaurant and order the food because they don't know the president's going to get it. Now, if the president wants to dine in, they will have the Secret Service go secure the kitchen and then run the social security numbers of everybody and see who's supposed to be there and who's not supposed to be there. And then, and I've never had this verified, but I saw this reported, there is a trained chef on the Secret Service who then watches the person cook the meal.
Eyes on the chef.
And this person's armed. So, if you watch cooking elimination shows, right, I think that's a real elimination challenge.
It's quite the stressful, quick-fire moment that an armed chef is watching another chef.
Yeah, packing heat, watching you, so...
did you ever write fiction? Do you ever dabble?
No.
That's the book.
That would be.
That chef, the armed chef.
That would be, right?
That would be so great. That follows the president.
Thanks for planting a seed.
I mean, just go there. It seems like the perfect setup for a great crime novel.
There's this new thing on Netflix. I haven't watched it yet, but I think it has some of those elements.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this?
No, what's the show?
The Residents. I think it's about
I haven't
murder.
checked it. Is it?
I think it's about murder in the White House.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are always good. Those are always popular. But thank you for clarifying that, because I never actually knew how it worked. But this is good to know that there's obviously a protocol there.
Yeah. And then there's a strict protocol with the food supply chain.
Yeah.
Right. So they have providers who are sworn to secrecy. In fact, if a provider, somehow it gets out that person provides food to the White House, usually they lose that contract. Yeah. So
this includes like Diet Cokes and
all that
5
stuff.
almonds and all that stuff.
But believe it or not, there was a time when the White House steward would just go to the local markets and shop, and people knew who that person was.
Interesting.
And then there was a time, for a long time, people would send food to the White House, and the White House would accept the food.
I mean, who wants to waste a great pie? I'm sure there were some tasty dishes there.
Yes, the most wild thing is someone sent a possum to Theodore Roosevelt.
Like a live, wait.
Yeah, live possum to be killed and then cooked.
Oh, as like a delicacy. Like here's a possum from my farm in West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, man. So what happened? Did they make a pie out of it?
They made the possum, but the president didn't eat it. But reportedly, the African-American staff was thrilled to get this, and they ate it. Because back in the day, roasted possum and roasted sweet potatoes was the dish. That was the Epicurean delight
How
for
can
African-Americans.
you imagine the flavors of this dish? I love this.
So I want to try it.
Yeah.
Never had it. But from everything I've heard, roasted possum is like roast pork.
Yeah.
But greasier. That's what I always hear.
Do you think there's a restaurant in America that does it?
I don't think so. If there is, I would definitely try to go.
Yeah, definitely. For research, at least. Well, moving on in the book, it's terrific. You aren't only including chefs of Asian heritage who served on the staff, but state dinners. And I was delighted that Edward Lee's name came up, and you wrote about the state dinner he gave for the South Korean president. And Edward's a friend of the show and spoken about this on the show. What did you find out about that dinner at the White House?
Yeah, so I was grateful that he was willing to give us an insider's account of that dinner. So it was interesting that he talked about just kind of the prep and how he consulted with First Lady Jill Biden to decide what the menu was going to be. But one thing that I really picked up on is he said that he talked with Chef Christetta Comerford about the dishware.
Yeah.
Because they have to decide what dishware they're going to use for the dinner. And so she was explaining, this was used at this particular state dinner, or this was used here. And so that's when the real moment of history kind of sunk in for him.
Yeah.
And then, the menu itself, the way he just kind of blends South Korea with his Southern experience in Brooklyn and everything. So, butterbean grits with a braised short rib, the Maryland crab cakes with, Korean influences highlights.
Yeah.
I just thought it was cool.
Very cool dinner. I remember following it the evening it was happening in the guest list. It was very cool they got to do that.
Yeah.
Lastly, you profile a chef who actually works in the White House, Tommy Krupatit. And he reveals the current, situation with the current administration. Talk about what you learned from Tommy.
Yeah, so he was another interesting guy because son of Thai immigrants. So he's kind of this hustle, He got interested in culinary in high school, went to a local culinary school at a community college, and then just kind of worked his way up. And then somehow he was working on a millennial. It was like a millennial celebration around 2000. And he met someone who was currently working in the White House. And he was like, oh, that's interesting. And so just pure hustle. He made it to a point where he got to the White House. And he had an eyewitness view of Christetta Comerford becoming the White House chef because he was already on staff at that time as assistant chef. And so he credits her mentorship with where he is today. And so it was really interesting just to hear his story. And that's a story nobody knows, right? Because he's never been profiled in anything. And now he's the White House chef. So, word on the street is he's very good at making, a nice steak with a tomato sauce that people might call ketchup. That's the word on the street.
That's the word on the street.
I can't verify this.
Adrian, that's great. I mean, food is such a central point of this administration. Health and Human Services Secretary always jumping in the news about food, and of course we have a very polarizing president. So, what have you observed about food in the current White House from your own research and just your interest in this topic?
So that's the frustrating thing. So in the past, people were more open about the food in the White House and what the president is eating. Nowadays, we don't get as many details. So I don't have a good answer for you on that right
Figured.
now. Yeah. People talked a lot more 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah, I think, there's probably less polarization, so food couldn't be used as a political football of some sort.
But, the savvy presidents understood how they could use food to make themselves more relatable. And by doing that and increasing their popularity, then it garners support for their political objectives.
100%.
Yeah, because if you're a popular president, then, you're going to get stuff done. And I think the savviest presidents understood that.
And I think Michelle Obama, you have to credit with having food at the center and of course, creating a garden and making that important. And what's your take on the Obama administration and food?
Oh, yeah, very important, especially on the policy side, the Let's Move initiative.
Yep.
Now, the White House had a garden for a long time.
Yeah.
In fact, John Adams had a garden,
Okay.
and there was a kitchen garden. But, they really ramped it up. And I think a lot of people learned from that experience. In fact, during that, she came out with the American Grown Cookbook.
Yeah.
And so one of the recipes was Cristetta Comerford's macaroni and cheese, but it's a cauliflower and cheese instead of the macaroni pasta. So we have that recipe in the book. And we actually have Chef Comerford talking about her experience connecting to the garden and also how she taught her own daughter about food through that time.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
This book is very special and so many great stories. It's not just a cookbook. It has lots of history in it. I think it's a great gift for the presidential fan in your life, which there are a lot of people.
There are.
It's very great. Adrian, is there any future project that you're working on? You have you're an interesting career in food writing and just in history. What are you thinking about right now?
So one book that I would love to do is a history of Black street food vendors.
Yeah.
And so I would show how they repped West Africa and the clothes that they wore, the intonation of their voice as they did what called street calls or street songs, the foods they introduced from West Africa, the ones they embraced from other cultures. But here's the really cool thing. Between 1880 to 1930, people would listen to Black folks rhyming and singing on street corners to get people's attention, and they wrote it down to sheet music. And I have 100 of those from various cities. So actually had an agent, shopped that project around. No one's really interested in it. There was one publisher interested, but it wasn't a good fit. So I'm trying to figure out, maybe let go of the idea that it has to be a book. Maybe it can be a podcast or something else. But that's the idea I want to get
That's
out.
a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions. What is the cuisine that are being sold to these street vendors? What kind of foods?
Oh, so it depends on the city. But, like take, for instance, New Orleans. There's something called kala, which is a rice fritter.
Yeah.
They were serving. And then pralines. So a lot of candies.
Yep.
Popcorn was big. Peanuts were big. In Brooklyn in the 1700s, there were enslaved Black women selling hot corn and baked pears.
Oh, wow.
On Fulton Street.
Right on Fulton Street, modern-day Fulton Street.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's how deep the tradition goes. Hot tamales is another very popular food that you see in a lot of places. Peanuts, all kinds of stuff.
It's a wonderful thought about writing a book about that.
Yeah.
Publishers, wake up.
I know, right? I wish you were a publisher.
we work at it. There's many publishers listening to this podcast. And honestly, Adrian, this has been such a pleasure talking to you and hearing about these great stories. Thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate you.
This is Taste is hosted and produced by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumber and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell, logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.